Solve for y. 3y squared minus 18y. So we're going to go ahead and factor by removing the greatest common factor. So the greatest common factor of 3y squared minus 18y is 3y. So when we divide 3y out of each term, we end up with y minus 6. So in its factored form, we have 3y times y minus 6. So now we set each factor to 0 and solve for y. So 3y equals 0, we would divide both sides by 3. And remember that 0 over anything except for 0 itself is 0. So one of our solutions is y equals 0. And for the second one, we're going to isolate y by adding 6 to both sides. So our second solution is y equals 6. So our next problem, solve for u. 3u squared minus 6 equals negative 7u. So the first thing that we want to do is make sure that we set our equation equal to 0. So we're going to move the negative 7u from the right hand side to the left hand side and make sure that we put this in descending order. So we end up with 3u squared plus 7u minus 6 equals 0. So we're going to use the AC method or reverse FOIL method to factor. The first thing we do in all factoring problems is to determine whether or not we can remove the greatest common factor. And there's nothing that divides evenly into the terms. So now we'll multiply the A, which is 3, times the C, which is negative 6. And that gives us negative 18. We're looking for the factors of negative 18 that add to a positive 7, and that would be a positive 9 and a negative 2, because 9 times negative 2 gives us negative 18, and 9 plus negative 2 gives us positive 7. So we're going to rewrite our expression. So we're rewriting 7u as positive 9u minus 2u, and we still have the minus 6 equals 0. Next, we're going to factor by grouping. And in the first group, we remove the greatest common factor, which is 3u. And when we do that, that leaves us u plus 3. And for the second group, the greatest common factor is a negative 2. And when we're dividing a negative 2 out of each, we also end up with u plus 3. Now you can see that our greatest common factor is u plus 3. And when we divide that out of each, that leaves us with 3u minus 2. So in its factored form, we have the quantity u plus 3 times the quantity 3u minus 2. So next, we set each factor to 0 and solve for u. So in the first, we're going to subtract 3 from both sides to isolate. And that gives us u equals negative 3. And for the second one, we're going to add 2 to both sides. And then divide by our coefficient 3. So our two solutions would be u equals negative 3 and u equals positive 2/3. Our next problem, the area of a rectangle is 77 square yards, and the length of the rectangle is 10 yards less than 3 times the width. find the dimensions of the rectangle. So let's first start by drawing a rectangle. And we have the length and we have the width. So remember, to find the area of a rectangle, we multiply length times width. So in this case, it says that our length is 10 yards less than 3 times the width. So that would be 3W, that's the 3 times the width, and 10 less than that. So now, let's go ahead and fill in the values for our formula. So area, which is 77, equals the length, which is now 3W minus 10 times the width. So what we're going to do in this case is distribute this W, since it's touching the parentheses, times the 3W and the minus 10. So this gives us 77 equals 3W squared minus 10W. So next, since we're dealing with solving a quadratic equation, we're going to move the 77 on the other side by taking its opposite. So now we have 0 equals 3W squared minus 10W minus 77. Next, we need to factor. So we're going to use the AC method again. So we're going to multiply the 3 times the negative 77, and that gives us negative 231. So we're looking for the factors of negative 231 that add to a negative 10. And that would be negative 21 and positive 11. So now we rewrite our expression using negative 21W and positive 11W to rewrite our middle term. And next, we're going to factor by grouping. So in our first group, we can remove a 3W, and that leaves us W minus 7. And in the second group, we can remove a positive 11, and that would leave us with W minus 7 as well. So our GCF is W minus 7. And when we divide that out of each term, that leaves us with 3W plus 11. Next, we set each factor to 0. So we set the W minus 7 to 0, as well as the 3W plus 11. Now remember, we're looking for how long our width and our length are. So our answers must be positive. So for the first one, we're going to add 7 to both sides, and that gives us a width of 7 yards. For the second one, we're going to subtract 11 from both sides and then divide by 3. Now, since we're talking about measurement, our width cannot be negative 11 over 3. So our width would be positive 7 yards. To find our length, remember our length is 3W minus 10. Since we know W is 7, we're going to substitute 7 in for W and then solve. 3 times 7 is 21, and 21 minus 10 is 11. So our length is 11 and our width is 7. And we can double check to make sure our answer is correct, because remember, area is length times width. So when I multiply 7 times 11, it gives me 77, which was our area. Our next problem, for the following right triangle, find the side length x. So we're talking about a right triangle. So in a right triangle, the shortest lengths are called our legs, and the longest side is called the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is always across from our right angle. Our right angle is the angle that you see with the square in the corner. So our hypotenuse would be x in this case. So we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which means we square the lengths of our shorter sides, add them together, and that will equal our hypotenuse squared. So in this case, it doesn't make a difference which one you call A and which one you call B, but our shorter sides are 9 and 40. And again, we know that because our longer side is always across from our right angle. So to set it up, we have 9 squared plus 40 squared would equal our hypotenuse squared. Or in this case, 9 squared plus 40 squared equals x squared. So what we're going to do is square 9. So 9 times 9 is 81, plus we're going to square 40. So 40 squared is 1600. And when we add those together, we get 1681 equals x squared. Now we're solving for x and not x squared. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. So the square root of x squared is just x, and the square root of 1681 is 41. So the length of our longer side is going to be 41. And again, kind of a visual check at the end, we know our shorter sides were 9 and 40. So this longest side has to be greater than the longest small side, which was 40. And 41, of course, is greater than 40. So our answer would be 41. Okay, so another one. It says for the following right triangle, find the side length x. Round your answer to the nearest hundredth. Now, when we're looking at the problem, x isn't always the hypotenuse. So I'm going to write down the Pythagorean theorem again. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. And c being the longest side. And remember, the longest side is always opposite of our right angle. So in this case, our longest side is 20. So when we set up our equation, it's going to be x squared, which is one of our shorter legs, plus 16 squared equals our hypotenuse squared, which is 20 squared. So we need to square 16, square 20, and then solve for x. So what we need to do is isolate the x squared by moving the 256 on the other side by taking its opposite. That gives us x squared equals 144, and we're solving for x. We know that our answer has to be smaller than 20 because 20 is our hypotenuse. So we're going to take the square root of both sides, and on your calculator you're going to put in the square root of 144, and that should give you 12. Our next problem is another Pythagorean theorem because we're dealing with a right triangle. It says a kite flying in the air has a 12-foot line attached to it. Its line is pulled taut and casts an 11-foot shadow. Find the height of the kite. Round your answer to the nearest tenth. So remember, we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Remember that your c squared is your hypotenuse, the longest side, and it's opposite the right angle. So we take 11 squared plus our unknown squared, because those are our smallest sides. I'll call that b, and that will equal our hypotenuse squared. So 11 squared, 121, plus b squared equals 12 squared, which is 144. So remember, you're going to isolate your variable. So we're going to subtract 121 from both sides. This would give us b squared equaling 23. We're going to take the square root of both sides. So b would equal the square root of 23. Now remember, in the instructions it says round to the nearest tenth. So you're going to put the square root of 23 in your calculator, and b would come out to 4.7958, etc. So since we're rounding to the nearest tenth, we look at the place value to the right. Since it's greater than 4, we round up. So b would be approximately 4.8. Again, rounded to the nearest tenth. Our next problem again deals with a right triangle. So we're asked to find the following right triangle side x. So the first thing I do is I locate my hypotenuse, which is opposite my right angle. So it's the sum of the squares of the smaller legs. So 7 squared plus 24 squared would equal my hypotenuse squared, or x squared in this case. So I'm going to square 7, which is 49. I'm going to square 24, which is 576, and that equals my x squared. I'm going to add the two together. That gives me 625 equals x squared. And then to solve, I'm taking the square root of both sides. And the square root of 625 is 25, and the square root of x squared is x. And again, Your answer should make sense. Remember, the hypotenuse is the longest side, so that's larger than 24 and 7, so my answer makes sense. Another practice problem using the Pythagorean theorem. So we know, again, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I find my right angle, and the side opposite is my hypotenuse. So I have x squared plus 11 squared equals my hypotenuse squared, or 15 squared in this case. So next, I'm going to go ahead and square my 11. Square my 15. And then remember, we're going to isolate our variable. So I'm going to subtract the 121 from both sides. And that would give me x squared equaling 104. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So x would equal the square root of 104. So again, we know that our answer should be smaller than our hypotenuse 15. So now on your calculator, you're going to put in the square root of 104. So that's equals 10.19803, etc. Since I'm rounding to the nearest hundredths, I'm going to look to the right of 9, and since this number is greater than 4, I'm going to round up. So my answer would be approximately 10.20. And again, that's smaller than my hypotenuse, so that answer would make sense.